Okay, so here we are, we've got everything painted pretty much that needs to be painted in this first pass. Now what I'm going to do is take some more watercolour on another tint layer and do another pass of that. Just popping in some colour adjustments with that and adding in some local colour that I want to get in. I want a bit of green growing up this stockade, for example, so I'll put that in. I'm careful not to be too literal about that. I want some hints of green, but I'm going to use a lot of grey as well, and some really low saturated washes, just kind of again building form like the first time I used it. It's a similar process, building in those forms, making everything appear a little bit more three-dimensional. I find the kind of watercolour effect really useful for putting in direct shadows. That nice rim you get, let me zoom in, show you. That kind of rim, slightly darker, I find that works really well. That's quite representative of how shadows lie. So we're getting there. You can see it's starting to come together. Something I always have to watch out for though at this kind of stage is getting too confident that I'm near the end. It's still a long way to go. Whilst everything is painted to some degree, there's a lot more to do to really polish it up. You can see it's quite pale, the whole image. So at this stage, these washes will add a little bit more tone to it, darken it up, beef up the mid-tones and darks a little bit. I think it's no bad thing to keep your options open early on, so you can push darker when you need to. As you can see as well, certain types of washes, a nice yellow wash will kind of beef up colour as well, deepens the colour. Depending obviously on what you're laying it over, certainly over greens and greyish colours will get a nice effect by putting some yellowy wash over it to just deepen it all. Getting some darker colour in at the base of this fence. Right, I think that's all I'm going to be able to do on that layer. So I'll flatten that down. Hang on, let's see. I'll tell you what. Let's hide that, and you can see what I've put on. There we go. That's what's on this layer in watercolour. It does look scarily like real-world watercolour. The older Art Rage watercolour. Look at that. Great stuff. Thank you, Ambient Design, making my job a heck of a lot easier. Right, let's merge all layers. And I'll do another pass with the watercolour again. A lot of people say to me that they think I've got a kind of ink wash style or a washy kind of style, which I never really give much credit to, because I tend to think of my style as quite opaque paint based and quite high in pasto. But actually, when I break it down and do something like this, I do realise I do use quite a lot of wash. Nothing wrong with that, you know. Sometimes I'll do an image and try not to use washes. Funnily enough, usually on character pieces, I try and get everything in with opaque colour. But on the more scenic stuff, it just seems to work well. You know, there's a certain subtlety in using colour this way. I think maybe it's just getting the variation in colour that we see in landscape. This seems to be a good way to do it. You'll notice I use the colour picker a lot more when I'm using washes, because I want a clean colour that I've selected rather than a colour from the canvas, which will tend to be quite dirty at this stage were I to use it as an overlaid wash. So I want quite pure colours laid on top of my grubby colours. Quite liking that rock there. It's a long way from being finished, but I dig how it's going. A bit of water wash just to want some slightly beefier tones at the foot of the front of the stockade. Let's just bung in another new layer. Tint layers again, I'm not using the watercolour layers as mentioned before, just tint layers. Because I want to tint. Just putting in some tone at the base of these stockade stakes seems to really root them in the ground a lot more. They're not floating. It's quite colourful at the moment actually, this. I think I'll be, some of this colour will be taken down as I work. Some of this at the back here I think it's a little bit on the strong side. Some of those greens got a bit too much cyan in them, but we'll see. I'm not in any rush to get rid of it, but I suspect it will go. Need to get more tone into these roofs as well, these are quite pale. I can be a terror for actually pulling out reference, which obviously, you know, good illustrations need good reference. And I was laughing at myself earlier on because I couldn't quite be bothered to dig out the photos that I've got of roundhouses and cranogs and that kind of thing. I love visiting those kind of places. And I've got quite a collection of photos which show these kind of roofs. And I was just like, oh, I'm quite comfy, you know, just noodling away and having an argument with myself to try and make myself get some reference out. And then I noticed sat on the desk in front of me is actually 8x6 photograph of the Loch Tay Cranog. Have a Google for that. It's a recreation of a cranog dwelling, lake dwelling. So it's got this fantastic thatched roof and all these stakes, and it's on these stilts in the loch, and it's sat there on the desk right in front of me. And I'm having an argument with myself whether I can be bothered to look for it, and there it is, which was quite funny. But that very much improved these buildings. I changed the shapes of the roofs, having just glanced at the reference. I had kind of bowed the roof outline the wrong way, and they should bulge outwards, which makes sense when you think about the construction of them. And again, that's exactly what reference is all about. You can't always keep everything in your head, you know, the shape of everything. Despite, you know, visiting these kinds of places, you don't necessarily retain every last detail. Okay, we're starting to get somewhere, but still, as I say, quite a lot to do. I don't feel the form isn't quite there yet. I'm not feeling the space yet. It's still a little bit flat. The colour's getting there, but still needs more work to just pop it out into 3 dimensions. And I possibly want to pull the palette together a little bit. This here to the left of the cranog, I'm not liking that colour there. It's too strong. But we'll just keep working away. Check out what I've got on the watercolour layers again. I thought that was quite interesting.